Brothers and sisters, life often places us in moments where fear whispers louder than faith. The world tells us to be careful, to stay comfortable, and to avoid risks. But when God calls a person to walk his path, fear is no longer the leader. Faith is God's path, has never been a road designed for the timid heart. It is a road designed for people who trust him even when the destination is hidden. When God leads, he does not promise an easy road. Instead, he promises his presence. And when the presence of God walks with you, fear loses its authority. Many people miss their purpose because they allow fear to vote on decisions God has already made. Fear says you are not ready. Fear says you might fail, but God says, I am with you. But God says, I am with you. When God told people throughout history to move, they moved before they saw the full picture. They walked not because they understood everything, but because they trusted the one who understood everything. Faith is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that God is bigger than fear. If you wait until you feel completely safe, you will never move where God wants you to go. God often places his greatest opportunities on the other side of your greatest fears. The question is not whether fear will appear. The question is whether faith will lead. When you walk in God's path, courage is not something you manufacture. Courage is something that grows when you remember who is guiding your steps. So today, choose faith over fear. Choose obedience over comfort. Choose God's direction over human hesitation. Because the path God prepares for you is not a path of fear. It is a path of purpose. And when you walk the path of purpose, fear has no power to stop you. Fear often tries to take the driver's seat in our lives. It speaks loudly in moments of uncertainty, whispering doubts into our minds and convincing us that stepping forward is dangerous. Fear tells us to stay where things are comfortable and familiar. It suggests that avoiding risk is the safest way to live, yet a life that is guided by God cannot be directed by fear. When faith leads, the voice of fear loses its power to control decisions. Fear has a way of exaggerating problems and minimizing possibilities. It focuses on what might go wrong rather than what God can make right. When people allow fear to guide them, they begin to measure every opportunity by their own limitations instead of by God's power. They start asking questions like, what if I fail, or what if I'm not good enough? These questions slowly build walls around their potential. Faith, however, asks a different question. What if God is able? Faith does not deny that challenges exist. Instead, it recognizes that God is greater than every challenge. Fear looks at the size of the obstacle, but faith looks at the greatness of the one who leads. When people begin to focus on God's strength rather than their own weakness, their perspective changes. Situations that once seemed impossible begin to appear manageable, not because the circumstances are easy, but because God is faithful. Fear thrives in uncertainty. When the future is unclear, fear tries to convince people that moving forward is reckless. But faith understands that uncertainty is often the place where trust grows the most. When everything is visible and predictable, faith is not required. True faith begins when people choose to trust God, even when they cannot see the entire path ahead. It is the willingness to move forward because God has spoken, even if the destination is still hidden. Many people delay their purpose because they wait for fear to disappear before they act. They believe that courage means feeling completely confident and fearless, but courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing to move forward while fear is still present. Faith allows people to step forward even when their emotions are uncertain. It teaches them that obedience to God matters more than comfort or personal security. Fear also has a habit of reminding people of their past mistakes. It says you tried before and it didn't work, or you are not qualified for this. These reminders can make people feel trapped by their history. But faith does not allow the past to define the future. Faith believes that God is able to create new opportunities, new strength, and new beginnings. Where fear sees failure, faith sees preparation. Another way fear controls people is by convincing them to compare themselves with others. It whispers that someone else is more talented, more prepared, or more deserving. This comparison can paralyze a person's willingness to step into what God has placed before them. Faith, however, understands that God calls individuals according to his purpose, not according to human comparison. Not according to human comparison. What God asks one person to do may be different from what he asks another, but every calling is meaningful when it is guided by him. Faith also changes how people interpret difficulties. When fear leads, challenges feel like signs that something is wrong. People assume that obstacles mean they should turn back. But when faith leads, difficulties are often seen as part of the journey. Growth rarely happens in comfort. Strength is developed through moments that require trust and perseverance. Faith understands that obstacles can become opportunities for God's power to be revealed. The decision to let faith lead is not made once and forgotten. It is a choice that must be renewed again and again. Every new step of obedience presents another opportunity for fear to speak. Yet, each time a person chooses faith over fear, their confidence in God grows stronger. Over time, the voice of faith becomes louder than the voice of doubt. Faith reshapes the way people think about the future. Instead of expecting problems, they begin to expect God's guidance. Instead of focusing on what they cannot control, they trust the one who controls all things. This shift does not remove challenges from life, but it removes the dominance of fear. When faith leads, people move forward with the understanding that God's direction is always greater than their uncertainty. When individuals allow faith to guide their decisions, they begin to discover possibilities they never imagined. Doors that once seemed closed begin to open. Paths that once seemed frightening become places where purpose unfolds. Fear may still appear, but it no longer determines the direction of their lives. Faith becomes the compass pointing them toward the plans that God has prepared, even when those plans require courage to follow. Fear often grows when people believe they are facing life's challenges alone. When individuals think they must rely only on their own strength, their problems can appear overwhelming. Uncertainty becomes heavier, obstacles seem larger, and the future begins to feel intimidating. Yet when a person becomes aware that God is present with them, the entire situation begins to change. The presence of God does not always remove the challenge, but it removes the sense of isolation that makes fear so powerful. God's presence brings a deep sense of assurance that no circumstance is faced without divine support. People may encounter moments where the road ahead seems dark or confusing, but knowing that God walks beside them creates stability within their hearts. Fear thrives in loneliness, but confidence grows when people understand that they are not navigating life by themselves. Many struggles in life become frightening because individuals try to control everything. They attempt to solve every problem through their own wisdom and ability. When things do not go according to their expectations, anxiety quickly appears. However, the awareness of God's presence reminds people that control does not belong to them alone. They can release their need to manage every detail and trust that God is actively working within their situation. God's presence also provides strength that goes beyond human capability. There are moments when people feel emotionally exhausted, mentally drained, or spiritually discouraged. Fear often enters during these moments of weakness. It suggests that the burden is too heavy and that the person does not have the strength to continue, yet the presence of God becomes a source of renewal. Instead of relying solely on their own limited energy, individuals begin to draw strength from a greater source. This divine strength often appears in subtle but powerful ways. Sometimes it comes as peace during a difficult decision. Sometimes it arrives as courage in the middle of uncertainty. Other times it appears as clarity when confusion once filled the mind. These moments remind people that God is not distant or silent, but actively involved in guiding their steps. Another powerful effect of God's presence is the peace it creates within the heart. Fear tends to fill the mind with endless questions and worst-case scenarios. It pushes people to imagine outcomes that may never even happen. This constant worry can create emotional chaos, making it difficult to think clearly or act wisely. But when people focus on the presence of God, a different atmosphere begins to develop. Instead of panic, there is calm. Instead of confusion, there is quiet confidence. This peace does not mean that problems suddenly disappear. Difficulties may still exist and decisions may still require courage. However, God's presence allows individuals to face these moments with stability rather than panic. They are able to move forward step by step, trusting that guidance will come at the right time. God's presence also changes how people interpret their circumstances. When fear dominates the mind, every challenge can look like a threat. People may begin to believe that setbacks mean failure or that obstacles mean they should give up. Yet when individuals recognize that God is with them, they begin to see situations differently. Challenges can become opportunities for growth, patience, and deeper trust. There are many moments in life where the path ahead is unclear. Decisions must be made without having complete information, and the future cannot be fully predicted. Fear tries to convince people that uncertainty is dangerous. But God's presence transforms uncertainty into a space where faith can develop. Instead of needing to see every step in advance, individuals learn to trust that guidance will appear when it is needed. Another important aspect of God's presence is the courage it inspires. Courage is not something people always create on their own. Often it grows when they remember who stands beside them. Just as a child feels safer walking through a dark place when holding a parent's hand, believers gain courage when they remember that God walks with them. The awareness of his presence becomes stronger than the voice of fear. When people begin to live with this awareness, their perspective on life shifts. Situations that once caused anxiety become moments where they practice trust. Instead of shrinking back from challenges, they step forward with confidence that they are not facing the journey alone. Fear may still attempt to whisper doubts, but those doubts lose their authority when people continually remind themselves that God is present, guiding, strengthening, and sustaining them through every step they take. Fear often stands like a barrier between people and the purpose that God has placed in their lives. It appears at the very moment when someone begins to sense a calling, a responsibility, or an opportunity that could lead to growth and impact. Instead of encouraging movement, fear whispers warnings. It suggests that the path ahead is too risky, too difficult, or too uncertain. Because of these doubts, many people stop before they ever take the first real step toward what they were meant to do. Purpose rarely appears in places that feel completely safe. It often requires individuals to move beyond familiar routines and comfortable environments. When people stay only where everything is predictable, they may feel secure for a moment, but they can also miss the deeper meaning that comes from following God's direction. Fear tries to convince them that safety is more valuable than purpose. Yet a life that avoids every challenge may never experience the fulfillment that comes from living according to God's plan. One of the most powerful ways fear blocks purpose is by magnifying the possibility of failure. It fills the mind with images of what could go wrong. People begin to imagine embarrassment, disappointment, or rejection. These thoughts can become so overwhelming that the opportunity itself begins to look dangerous. Instead of focusing on what could be achieved, individuals concentrate on what could be lost. This mindset causes them to turn away from possibilities that might have led to meaningful change. Purpose, however, often grows in places where people are willing to move forward despite uncertainty. When individuals trust God's guidance, they begin to understand that failure does not have to be final. Even when mistakes happen, they can become valuable lessons that shape character and develop wisdom. Fear views failure as a permanent defeat, but faith sees it as part of the journey toward growth. Another way fear interferes with purpose is by creating self-doubt. It convinces people that they are not capable, not talented enough, or not prepared for the responsibilities that lie ahead. These thoughts slowly weaken confidence and make individuals question their own abilities. They begin to believe that someone else would be more suitable for the task. Over time, this comparison causes them to step back from opportunities that may have been designed specifically for them. Purpose does not always require perfect ability at the beginning. Often, the process of stepping forward is what develops the skills and strength needed to continue. When people move in faith, they grow along the way. Their character deepens, their understanding expands, and their confidence increases with experience. Fear, however, demands perfection before movement. It tells people to wait until they feel completely ready, even though that moment may never come. Fear also encourages people to focus on immediate comfort rather than long-term impact. Choosing comfort can feel appealing because it avoids stress and uncertainty. Yet purpose frequently requires effort, sacrifice, and perseverance. It asks people to think beyond their personal convenience and consider how their actions might influence others. When individuals overcome fear and step into their purpose, they often discover that their lives can inspire, support, and uplift those around them. The path toward purpose is rarely a straight line. There may be unexpected turns, challenges, and delays. Fear interprets these moments as signs that something has gone wrong. It tries to convince people that the journey should be abandoned. But faith sees these moments differently. Challenges can strengthen resilience, refine character, and deepen trust in God's guidance. What appears to be an obstacle may actually become a stepping stone toward greater clarity and direction. When individuals decide to move beyond fear, they begin to experience a different perspective on life. Opportunities that once seemed intimidating begin to appear meaningful. Instead of asking whether the journey will be easy, they begin to ask whether the journey is worthwhile. Purpose. C becomes a source of motivation that is stronger than temporary discomfort. As people continue moving forward, they often realize that fear loses much of its influence once action begins. The anticipation of a challenge is sometimes more intimidating than the challenge itself. When the first step is taken, confidence begins to grow. Each new experience provides evidence that progress is possible. Living with purpose requires the courage to step into unknown spaces. It requires trust that God's direction is meaningful, even when the outcome is not immediately visible. Fear may always attempt to slow the journey, but it does not have to determine the destination. When individuals choose faith over hesitation, they move closer to the opportunities, growth, and impact that God intended for their lives. Faith often begins where complete understanding ends. Many people feel comfortable moving forward only when they can clearly see the outcome of their choices. They want detailed plans, predictable results, and full explanations before taking action. This desire for certainty is natural because it provides a sense of control and security. However, the journey of faith does not always follow the pattern of complete visibility. Instead, it often requires individuals to step forward, even when many details remain unknown. Life rarely reveals every answer at once. Decisions about purpose, direction, and responsibility frequently appear before the full picture is visible. In these moments, people must decide whether they will wait for perfect clarity or trust that guidance will unfold as they move forward. Fear encourages waiting. It says that action should only happen when every possible outcome has been analyzed and understood. Yet faith recognizes that complete certainty is not always necessary in order to begin. Moving without seeing everything does not mean acting recklessly or ignoring wisdom. Faith is not blind impulse or careless decision-making. Instead, it is a thoughtful trust that God is able to guide the process step by step. Just as a traveler walking through the night depends on a small light to illuminate the next few steps rather than the entire road, a person of faith learns to move forward with the understanding that clarity often arrives gradually. One of the reasons people hesitate to move without full visibility is the fear of making the wrong decision. They worry that if they step forward and something does not work as expected, the consequences might be difficult. This concern can create hesitation that prevents any progress at all, yet faith recognizes that growth often occurs through experience. Even when a path includes challenges or adjustments, valuable lessons are gained that shape wisdom and maturity. When people insist on seeing the entire outcome before beginning, they may unknowingly limit their opportunities.
Many meaningful achievements begin with uncertainty. New ideas, creative efforts, and personal callings often start as small steps that gradually develop into something larger.
If individuals wait until everything is guaranteed, they may miss the moment when action was possible. Faith also transforms how people respond to uncertainty. Instead of viewing it as a threat, they begin to see it as an invitation to trust. Uncertainty becomes a place where reliance on God deepens. Each step forward becomes an act of confidence that guidance will continue to appear. Over time, this process strengthens character and builds resilience because individuals learn that they are capable of navigating situations that once seemed intimidating. Another important aspect of moving forward without seeing everything is the role of patience. Faith is not always about immediate results. Sometimes the journey involves waiting while progress slowly unfolds. During these seasons, people may question whether their steps were worthwhile. Fear tries to use these delays to create doubt. It suggests that nothing is happening or that the effort was unnecessary. Yet faith understands that meaningful progress often requires time. Patience allows individuals to remain committed, even when visible outcomes take longer than expected. It encourages them to continue trusting the process rather than abandoning the path prematurely. Many important developments happen quietly before they become visible. Just as seeds grow beneath the soil before appearing above the ground, the results of faithful steps may be forming long before they are fully recognized. Moving forward without complete visibility also strengthens humility. It reminds people that they do not control every detail of life. Instead of depending solely on personal understanding, they learn to rely on guidance that comes through reflection, prayer, wisdom, and experience. This humility creates openness to learning and adapting along the way. As individuals practice this kind of faith, their confidence gradually grows. Each step that leads to new insight reinforces the belief that movement was worthwhile. What once felt uncertain begins to feel purposeful. Over time, they recognize that the journey itself has shaped them into stronger, wiser, and more courageous individuals. Faith does not demand that every question be answered before action begins. Instead, it invites people to trust that guidance will appear as they continue moving forward. While the entire path may not be visible from the beginning, each step reveals enough light to continue the journey. Through this process, people discover that progress is possible even in uncertainty, and that meaningful direction often emerges only after the first step has been taken. Obedience often begins with a simple decision to trust God's direction, even when the situation feels uncertain. Many people search for courage before they take action, believing that confidence must appear first. They assume that once they feel brave enough, then they will move forward. Yet courage does not always arrive before the step is taken. In many cases, courage grows after obedience begins. When individuals choose to follow God's guidance, even with hesitation, they discover strength that was not visible before. Uncertainty is a common part of life. Situations change, plans develop slowly, and outcomes are not always predictable. In these moments, fear often attempts to take control of a person's thoughts. It suggests that the safest choice is to avoid movement until everything becomes clear. However, obedience requires a willingness to trust God beyond personal comfort. It means believing that His guidance is trustworthy even when emotions are unsettled. The first step of obedience may feel small, but it carries significant meaning. When people act according to what they believe God is leading them to do, they begin to experience a shift within themselves. Doubt starts to lose its dominance and confidence gradually increases. Each act of obedience becomes evidence that progress is possible. Over time, these small decisions accumulate and form a pattern of faithful living. One of the reasons obedience strengthens courage is because it aligns people with a purpose greater than their fears. When individuals focus only on their own limitations, every challenge appears overwhelming. They measure situations by what they personally can accomplish, and this perspective can easily lead to discouragement. Obedience, however, redirects this attention toward God's power rather than human weakness. It reminds people that they are not acting alone, but participating in something guided by divine wisdom. Another important aspect of obedience is the discipline it develops. Courage is not simply a moment of emotional strength. It is often the result of consistent commitment. Each time a person chooses obedience over hesitation, they strengthen their ability to respond with faith in the future. The next challenge may still bring uncertainty, but the memory of previous experiences provides reassurance that obedience can lead to meaningful outcomes. Obedience also creates clarity over time. When people delay action because they want complete understanding, they often remain stuck in uncertainty. Movement itself can reveal information that was not visible before. As individuals follow God's direction step by step, they begin to recognize patterns of guidance and growth. What once seemed confusing gradually becomes clearer because they are actively engaged in the journey. Fear tends to exaggerate the risks of obedience. It paints vivid pictures of potential problems and highlights every possible difficulty. While challenges can certainly exist, fear often ignores the potential benefits that come from faithful action. Obedience allows individuals to discover opportunities that would have remained hidden if they had chosen to stay in a place of hesitation. Courage also develops through the realization that obedience is not about perfection. People sometimes hesitate because they believe they must perform flawlessly once they begin. This expectation can create intense pressure that discourages action, yet obedience is not about achieving perfect results. It is about responding faithfully to what God is asking in the present moment. When individuals understand this, the fear of making mistakes becomes less overwhelming. Another powerful result of obedience is the encouragement it brings to others. When people act with faith despite uncertainty, their giants but can inspire those around them. Courage often spreads through observation. Someone who witnesses another person moving forward with trust may find the strength to take their own step as well. In this way, obedience has an influence that extends beyond the individual. Obedience also deepens a person's relationship with God. Trust grows stronger through experience. When individuals respond to God's guidance and later see how circumstances unfold, their confidence in His direction increases. They begin to recognize that obedience leads to growth, wisdom, and unexpected opportunities. Each experience becomes part of a larger story of trust and development. Through repeated acts of obedience, fear gradually loses its control. It may still appear in certain situations, but it no longer determines the outcome. Courage becomes more natural because it has been practiced. Individuals learn that they are capable of moving forward even when they do not have every answer. This process transforms how people approach life. Instead of waiting for courage to appear before acting, they understand that courage often grows through action itself. Obedience becomes the starting point, and with every faithful step, confidence continues to expand. Living a fearless life on God's path requires a mindset that is constantly renewed by trust and hope. The way people think about their future strongly influences the decisions they make in the present. When fear dominates the mind, it often fills the imagination with negative possibilities. People begin to expect failure, disappointment, or obstacles before they even take a step forward. These expectations slowly shape behavior, causing hesitation and limiting the willingness to pursue meaningful opportunities. A person guided by faith learns to view the future through a different lens. Instead of assuming that the worst will happen, they develop confidence that God is actively guiding their journey. This perspective does not ignore the reality of challenges, but it refuses to believe that challenges are stronger than God's purpose. Faith teaches individuals to expect guidance even when circumstances appear uncertain. One of the reasons fear becomes so influential is because the future is unknown. Human beings naturally desire clarity and predictability. They want assurance that their efforts will lead to positive results. However, life rarely provides that level of certainty. Plans change, unexpected situations arise, and outcomes cannot always be controlled. When people try to secure absolute certainty, they may find themselves trapped in constant worry. Faith transforms this uncertainty into an opportunity for trust. Instead of demanding to know every detail, individuals learn to believe that God's wisdom extends beyond their understanding. They recognize that while they cannot predict every outcome, they can rely on the one who sees the entire path. This trust gradually replaces anxiety with confidence. The way people speak about their future also reveals whether fear or faith is guiding their thoughts. When fear dominates, conversations are often filled with statements of doubt. People say things like, "It will probably fail," or "Nothing ever works out." These words reinforce a negative outlook and make progress feel unlikely. Faith, on the other hand, encourages language that reflects hope and possibility. Instead of predicting failure, individuals begin to express confidence that God's direction will lead somewhere meaningful. Another important part of living fearlessly is learning to focus on purpose rather than problems. Problems can easily consume attention because they demand immediate solutions. When individuals spend most of their energy worrying about difficulties, they may lose sight of the larger vision for their lives. Purpose provides motivation that is stronger than temporary setbacks. It reminds people that their journey has meaning beyond the obstacles they face today. Purpose also creates resilience. When someone understands that their life has a meaningful direction, they are less likely to abandon their efforts when challenges appear. Fear may still try to create doubt, but purpose provides a reason to continue. It reminds individuals that what they are pursuing matters not only for themselves, but also for the people who may be influenced by their actions. A fearless mindset also requires patience with the process of growth. Many people want immediate results, but meaningful development often takes time. Skills improve gradually, opportunities appear slowly, and understanding deepens through experience. When individuals expect instant success, they may feel discouraged if progress seems delayed. Faith encourages patience by reminding people that God's timing may differ from human expectations. Patience allows individuals to remain committed even when they cannot yet see the full results of their efforts. Just as seeds planted in the soil require time before they produce visible growth, the steps taken in faith may need time before their impact becomes clear. Recognizing this truth helps people avoid the temptation to quit prematurely. Living without fear also involves gratitude for the present moment. Fear often pulls attention toward future worries, causing individuals to overlook the blessings that already exist in their lives. Gratitude shifts the focus back to what is currently good and meaningful. It strengthens faith by reminding people of the ways God has already provided guidance and support. Over time, this combination of trust, hope, patience, and gratitude reshapes a person's perspective. Instead of approaching life with constant anxiety about what might happen, they begin to move forward with quiet confidence. The future no longer appears as a threat, but as a place where purpose can continue to unfold. This transformation does not happen overnight. It develops gradually as individuals practice trusting God in both small decisions and larger challenges. Each experience reinforces the understanding that fear does not need to determine the direction of their lives. By choosing faith repeatedly, they cultivate a mindset that looks toward the future with courage, expectation, and the belief that God's guidance will continue to lead them forward. Faith and fear are constantly in conversation within the human heart. Every person faces moments when doubt and uncertainty threaten to overwhelm, and it is precisely in these moments that the decision to trust God becomes essential. Fear often tries to dictate behavior by magnifying problems, creating what-ifs, and imagining obstacles before they even appear. It focuses on limitations, mistakes, and possible failures, convincing people that hesitation is the safest course. Yet faith calls individuals to a higher perspective, reminding them that God's guidance is greater than any fear that arises. The first step in overcoming fear is awareness. People must recognize when fear is influencing their decisions. Fear often presents itself subtly as caution, procrastination, or self-doubt. It can disguise itself as wisdom, suggesting that delaying action is responsible or prudent. Yet discerning the difference between thoughtful preparation and fear-driven hesitation is crucial. Faith requires people to examine their motives and ask whether their hesitation is rooted in trust or in worry. Once fear is identified, its power begins to diminish. Fear thrives on the unknown. People naturally desire security and predictability. When outcomes are uncertain, fear emphasizes what could go wrong, often exaggerating the risks. It paints pictures of worst-case scenarios and insists that caution is the only safe option. Faith, however, does not depend on complete visibility or certainty. It operates on the principle that God's presence and guidance provide stability even when circumstances are unclear. While fear focuses on the magnitude of the unknown, faith focuses on the greatness of God. Another way fear holds influence is by reminding people of past mistakes or shortcomings. It whispers that because a person has failed before, they are likely to fail again. Fear may insist that previous experiences define future outcomes. Faith, in contrast, understands that past mistakes are not limitations, but lessons. Every failure carries insight and growth that prepares a person for the next step. By reflecting on past victories and moments of perseverance, individuals can strengthen their confidence in God's continued guidance. Fear also attempts to isolate. It tells individuals that they must face challenges alone or that asking for help is a sign of weakness. Isolation amplifies worry, creating a sense that the burden is heavier than it truly is. Faith reminds people that God is present in every situation. They are not walking the path alone. God's presence offers strength, wisdom, and courage far beyond what humans can generate on their own. Recognizing that divine companionship is constant diminishes the feeling of vulnerability that fear seeks to exploit. Faith and action are inseparable. Courage does not arrive magically. It grows as people choose to act in spite of fear. Taking steps forward, even when the way is uncertain, weakens fear's control over the mind. Each decision to move in alignment with God's guidance provides evidence that faith is trustworthy. As action accumulates, confidence builds and fear's voice becomes less commanding. Faith is cultivated in the practice of obedience. It is in choosing the right step over and over that fear loses its authority. The way people interpret obstacles also determines whether fear or faith dominates. Fear sees obstacles as reasons to retreat or give up. Every setback is interpreted as a failure, and every challenge becomes a reason to question purpose or calling. Faith views obstacles differently. Challenges are seen as opportunities for growth, perseverance, and greater reliance on God. Each difficulty faced with trust strengthens character and deepens understanding. Over time, experiences once feared become reminders of God's faithfulness and the resilience that faith produces. Perspective is another key factor. Fear magnifies the present problem, making it appear larger than it is and minimizing the potential for good. Faith, however,